At the same time, the president's personal life in Arkansas is getting renewed attention as a result of allegations from two members of his security force when he was governor. More on that tonight from NBC's Jim Miklaszewski.
Last August in Arkansas, the president and first lady renewed old acquaintances with state troopers who used to guard the former Little Rock First family. But two troopers have stepped forward to renew allegations Mr. Clinton had engaged in extramarital affairs for years while governor, and that the affairs continued after he was elected president. In a story in the conservative magazine American Spectator, two troopers, formerly members of Governor Clinton's security detail, claim that the troopers themselves would help arrange, then stand guard over sexual liaisons involving Mr. Clinton. Many at the governor's mansion itself. One of the troopers, Larry Patterson, told CNN that he took one of the women to a send-off rally when Governor Clinton headed to Washington for his inauguration.
Hillary saw her. She told me, she said, I know who she is. I know what she is here for. I said, no, she is a friend of mine. She said, no, she is not. Get the whore out of here.
In a White House statement, the president's senior aide, Bruce Lindsay, called the charges ridiculous and said they don't dignify a response. Privately, Clinton aides are furious and set out to discredit the accusers. They claim that the allegations are being orchestrated by Little Rock attorney and Clinton arch-rival Cliff Jackson. Jackson represents the two troopers and acknowledges they could have a book deal in the future. Jackson claims his clients are now getting indirect pressure from the White House to keep their mouths shut or else.
That my reputation would be destroyed.
Buddy Young used to head the governor's security detail and denies the allegations against Mr. Clinton. He now works for the federal government and admits he called one of the troopers, but says he issued no threats.
They've done a terrible disservice to themselves, to the president, to me.
The White House also admits President Clinton himself called other troopers in the past few weeks, but they insist it was only to get information, not to make threats or promises. Clinton aides say the president's been on a roll and claim the timing of these allegations is aimed at knocking him off his stride. But just as in the campaign, they predict he'll survive these charges too. Jim Miklaszewski, NBC News.
State trooper who's been on the force 27 years. He spent 7 of those years at the governor's mansion providing protection for the Clintons. His partner is Roger Perry, who's been a trooper for 18 years and spent 5 years at the mansion.
We saw the real person every day. We lived with him on a 24-hour basis.
The troopers, who were state employees, alleged that they were forced to do everything, from ferrying Governor Clinton to and from dates with other women, carrying out menial tasks for the family, and spreading damaging information about political opponents.
For example, during one election, another candidate was alleged to have fathered an illegitimate child. Trooper Patterson said Clinton asked him to approach the alleged mother.
Find out if she will come out publicly and what it will cost, money or a job or what it will take to get this woman to do it.
Trooper Patterson says the woman refused. The troopers say they helped Clinton pick up women up to the day he left for Washington to become president. They claim that they personally witnessed Clinton having 6 or 7 affairs from 1987 until 1993.
On several occasions would tell me the blonde or the brunette or the redhead or the lady in the red dress or the green dress. Go find out what her name is, get her telephone number, and I would do that. I blocked streets for him while these liaisons went on with the women. I took him to places in Little Rock and stayed in the car for 2.5 and 3 hours at 1, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning while these liaisons were going on.
The troopers refused to name the alleged women, and they have given other news organizations conflicting accounts on what they saw firsthand or what they were told by colleagues. They say they did not speak out about any of this during the campaign because their supervisor, Buddy Young, told them they would be fired.
4 times during the campaign, I was called in to Buddy Young's office and counseled and told, whatever you do not talk to the news media.
Buddy Young denies ever having those conversations and says the troopers' allegations about the Clintons are false.
I don't think that's true. I certainly never saw it happen. I was never a part of it. Don't know of it ever happening.
President Clinton has since appointed Young to a federal job. And Young says the troopers are making the allegations because they are jealous they did not get appointments as well.
After President Clinton appointed me to the job that I have with FEMA as regional director, they thought that they should have received some kind of an appointment also, and they didn't. And I think they're unhappy and disgruntled about it, and they're seeking revenge.
For its part, the White House continues to coordinate with Buddy Young on how the story will be told. During our interview, he received this call from senior White House advisor Bruce Lindsay.
Hello?
Buddy, Bruce.
Yeah.
What do you know?
I'm on the phone right now, Bruce, in the middle of an interview.
With who?
ABC, is that right?
Yeah.
ABC, yeah.
Okay, we may need you to do CNN, too, at some point. Will you call me? Will you have them page me after you get off?
Have,
Call the White House and ask them to page me while you hold, or have me call you right back.
okay.
Okay?
All right.
Thanks.
Thanks.
The troopers who are still at work say they no longer have any reason to fear for their jobs because they no longer report to Bill Clinton or Buddy Young. Still, they have hired a lawyer to represent them. He is Cliff Jackson, a former classmate of Clinton's and a longtime political enemy.
The troopers say they have received no money for telling their story and have not negotiated a contract with a publisher. But they do not rule out the possibility of writing a book in the near future, which could make both them and their attorney an enormous amount of money. Mike Von Fremd, ABC News, Little Rock.
As we said earlier, the White House has called these latest charges ridiculous, though some people believe we learn more about the lengths Mr. Clinton would go to so as to indulge in allegedly inappropriate behavior. The White House insists that similar allegations were made, investigated, and responded to during the presidential campaign.
Of course, this is not how the Clintons wanted their first year to end, with all going well on the political front, and then these news eruptions, including one from Arkansas, allegations from members of the Clinton security force when he was governor. The charges are unsubstantiated, but they have enraged Mrs. Clinton, who today lashed out at the accusers. NBC's Jim Miklashevsky.
The White House made every effort today to make it appear it was business as usual. At a couple of public appearances, President Clinton showed no signs of the controversy swirling around him. But behind the scenes, the White House was engaged in top-level damage control, making every attempt to get these latest allegations of extramarital affairs off the front pages and out of network news. But Hillary Rodham Clinton fanned the flames today when she lashed out at the president's accusers. In a series of interviews with the wire services, she called the allegations outrageous, terrible stories that will end up in the garbage can. She suggested that the stories were planted for political and financial reasons. Mrs. Clinton said it's sad, especially here in the Christmas season. People, for their own purposes, would be attacking my family. Some of the president's political advisors worried Mrs. Clinton only fueled the controversy. They said her remarks were strictly personal, not part of any White House strategy. And later, the First Lady's office laid down new ground rules for TV interviews scheduled for tomorrow. No interview unless there was an agreement to ask no questions about the allegations. Back in Little Rock, the two state troopers who went public with their charges were on a damage control mission of their own. Despite the possibility they may still sell their story in a book deal, they deny they're in this for the money.
No one has promised me or paid me anything.
The things that we saw at the governor's mansion as police officers assigned to governor's security would shock most of the people of this country.
But the White House continued today to attack the motives and character of the two troopers and their attorney, Cliff Jackson, who they say has a personal and political vendetta against Mr. Clinton.
Clinton aides have two hopes tonight. One, that there'll be no new charges. Two, that this will quickly blow over. But one senior administration official complained that every time they have to deny a new round of these kinds of allegations, it gets harder. Jim Miklashevsky, NBC News.
The news storm about and around President Clinton is our lead story tonight. It was caused by the allegations from two Arkansas state troopers that they facilitated extramarital affairs for Mr. Clinton while he was governor and even since he was elected president. White House officials have denied the charges, but conceded last night that the president had called members of his former Arkansas security detail about them. Today, First Lady Hillary Clinton told the Associated Press the accusations were outrageous and were an attempt by Clinton opponents to hurt the president politically. She suggested the Arkansas troopers were motivated by the desire to make some money. The first story about the charges appeared in the American Spectator, a magazine of conservative opinion and analysis, and on CNN. They were part of a 1-2 bad day punch for the Clinton White House, the second being yesterday's admission that Defense Secretary-designate Bobby Ray Inman had not paid Social Security taxes on his part-time housekeeper and had only that day paid the government $6,000 in owed taxes. Similar problems caused two women nominees for Attorney General to fall by the wayside earlier in the Clinton administration. We offer three perspectives on all of this, those of our regular analyst, syndicated columnist Mark Shields, Linda Chavez, a fellow at the Manhattan Institute, and Howard Kurtz, who covers the media for the Washington Post. He had a story this morning on how the Clinton story has been handled. He's the author also of the recently published book, Media Circus. Mark, what's the most important thing about the trooper charges story to you?
The most important thing is that the story has legs, potentially, Jim, in the report that the president had spoken to the troopers himself in an act that just kind of defies understanding, and that their head...
Now, the White House says he didn't try to he didn't threaten anybody,
no.
He didn't do any, all he wanted to know was what was going on.
And the White House also makes the point that this is a president who talks to everybody, who stays in constant contact in Arkansas, who has great confidence in his own persuasive abilities, as proved most recently in the NAFTA vote. But at the same time, the rumor, the charge, allegation by those whom he did talk to, that job offers were bandied about. If this is the case, then there's something upon which his political opponents can hang their legal and political hats.
You agree, Linda, that that's the most serious part of this?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what a lot of people are talking about are the salacious details, but in fact, the real problem here for Bill Clinton is that if either he or perhaps this fellow Buddy Young, who was given a job at FEMA,
well, let's explain that. He was an official of the Arkansas State Police. He's now in Denton, Texas, as the regional director of the Federal Emergency Management Organization, and still very friendly with the Clinton and the Clinton people in the White House.
And,
right?
and apparently, he may also have called some of the state troopers, and jobs may have been offered, or threats may have been made. In any case, if any federal official made such a telephone call, we're now not just talking about sex improprieties, we're talking about potential criminal violations, we're talking about felonies. And under normal circumstances, a special prosecutor would be appointed. Certainly during the waning days of the Bush administration, when allegations were brought against a high member of the Bush White House, Janet Mullins, even though not required to by law, Attorney General Bill Barr did appoint a special prosecutor to investigate those charges. So that's the most serious thing he has to contend with.
Now, Mark, what about the sex charges themselves? There's a lot of commentary since this thing broke over the weekend has gone along these lines. Hey, look, the president made a deal with the American people on 60 Minutes and otherwise. He said, okay, Mrs. Clinton and I had some problems with our marriage before. We put all that behind us. Now, if these charges turn out to be true, is that a serious problem that he went ahead and had some indiscretions after that?
I think there is a problem from the election forward. And the reason I say that demarcation point is this, Jim. The rather spectacular moment in which Bill Clinton introduced really himself and Hillary Clinton to the American people on Super Bowl night 1992 to 40 million Americans, in which they made that statement you described. And Hillary Clinton came on not simply as a wounded victim. She came on as a strong, independent, confident woman who said, he's okay. He's okay. And she really gave him sort of an innocence by association. And I think it probably saved his candidacy right then and there, in spite of the Tammy Wynette line about stand by your man. I'm not that sort of a person. The key point then, I think there was a tacit covenant between the American voters and Bill Clinton. As one of his White House people argued to me, and I think effectively, the American people weren't choosing personal perfection in 1992. They knew that. They were choosing economic change. But the covenant was, once you're elected president of the United States, what happened before, happened before. Now you're president. You're public property. You have entered into the pantheon of our heroes. There is a level of behavior expected of a president, and there's a risk and a recklessness and exposure that we're not interested in your even considering. And I think to me that's the key point.
Would it also speak to the judgment problem too?
Well, first of all, the kind of problem that is described in the American Spectator problem goes beyond having an affair. We're talking about behavior that borders on the pathological. This is even beyond the Gary Hart phenomenon. We're talking about allegations made about activities involving a man who has been elected president of the United States, with women being shuttled in and out of the State House in Little Rock, and quite frankly, it questions his state of mind. What would ever possess this man to put not just his career, but his family, everything on the line, because the potential for exposure was so great.
Now, Howard Kurtz, we're talking about this story as if it is in fact true. Now, you had a story this morning about detailing the problems that the, quote, mainline media had in deciding to go with this story, and I can certainly vouch we had those problems in this organization, even deciding to have the conversation we're having right now. Now, but one of the reasons we decided to go ahead was, in fact, the story that you told.
You're going to blame it all on me?
No, I'm going to blame it on you. But just take us through how this thing came out and how it trickled out and where we are, how we got where we are tonight.
Jim, because the mainstream media are so skittish frequently about stories about sex and public officials, somebody has to put it in play. We saw this in the Jennifer Flowers case. It was the supermarket tabloid Star. Once somebody gets it out there, then many of us can then react. In this case, it was the American Spectator, a magazine that makes no secret of its distaste for Bill Clinton, that put it in play, that played the catalyst role. But what's interesting is the people who were peddling this from Arkansas didn't only want it to be in a conservative magazine, they wanted it to be in a liberal national newspaper, so they were also dealing with the Los Angeles Times. The Los Angeles Times couldn't quite decide what the publisher story they held up. It was coming out in the Spectator. So then the attorney in Little Rock, who was no fan of Bill Clinton's, took it to CNN.
Represents these two troopers. Was trying to help the two troopers get the maximum play.
They want to get this across the country, so they go to CNN. We'll make the troopers available for a television interview. So CNN goes on the air Sunday night. That leads to an Associated Press story, which in turn gets my newspaper involved, which in turn convinces the LA Times to publish its story. So it works from their point of view. They get it out in enough media outlets that it sort of catches fire, and of course here we are discussing it tonight.
Now, for instance, today, your newspaper had your story, had the main story above the fold on the front page, then had, in addition to your story, a couple of other sidebars inside. Now, they devoted almost, not a whole page, but inside to it as well. The New York Times, which I'm sure the Washington Post considers its major national competitor, had a wire story way inside the newspaper.
7 paragraphs.
Yeah, right.
This was sort of a replay, in fact, of the roles that we played during the Jennifer Flowers story, which I would argue, distasteful as it was, turned out to be one of the most significant events of the '92 campaign. I think the feeling of our editors, and many people I've interviewed in the last couple of days, is this story is out there. Your readers and viewers are going to see it, whether it's on CNN or ABC or NBC or read it in the American Spectator. Your job is to put it in some kind of perspective. Tell people, questioning the motivation of those making the charges, is there anything to it? How seriously should we take it? There's another view that you shouldn't dignify it by playing it up. That's apparently the approach the New York Times has taken. Some people I've talked to think that's sort of, sticking your head in the sand. I guess we'll have to wait and see how it plays out.
Yeah. How do you feel about the way the press has handled this, Mark?
Well, it's interesting. Howard's absolutely right. The press doesn't know how to handle it. I mean, it's sort of radioactive. They circle around it. They walk around it. The argument that could be made, and in fact, Howard did in his book, which I recommend. He made the point that to listen to the conversations, the taped conversations between Bill Clinton and Jennifer Flowers, was to conclude that this was not a casual relationship. I mean, these were two people who knew each other reasonably well, and yet the mainline press kind of walked away from it. Walked away from the story.
Point is made in the American Spectator article, too, the same point.
We walked away from it in large part, and what we hung our hats on, I guess as a member of the mainline press, or whatever, mainline, I hate that term, but it was
How
that...
about mainstream?
Mainstream? I'll go with mainstream.
All right.
Okay. is that it was paid for, and it was in a magazine that you buy at the checkout counter of the Safeway, that's also arguing that Elvis was seen yesterday in a New York Yankees uniform in a 7-Eleven in Edina, Minnesota. And, you know, that's, I mean, that's, so for that reason we could say, well, it wasn't the real thing. Yeah. And this really, I think that the key this time was it leaped the Spectator into CNN, Los Angeles Times. It's mainstream now. I think the New York Times is kidding itself if it doesn't think this is a real story.
Well, there are two reasons I think this is different. One is these state troopers are not Gennifer Flowers. You're talking about a 26-year veteran and a 16-year veteran, one of whom is still the head of the State Troopers Association. There's no money involved.
Except that they may want a book contract.
They may want a book contract.
They want a book contract. They want to make money.
But there's another problem, and that is the White House, I think. And Bill Clinton himself made this a story. It was those telephone calls. This is sex, lies, and telephone calls. That's what this story is all about. It's those telephone calls that Bill Clinton made to the troopers, which the White House has now admitted he made, to try and calm this story down. If it's all lies, you walk away from it, you ignore it, you don't dignify it. And his getting involved made it a story.
What is you heard what Mark said, Howie, that he thought the story had legs. Do you agree that this thing's going to move?
I'm not so sure. I think it depends on whether any new information comes out in the next 48 hours, because I think many of us in our business are uncomfortable with it, would probably like to see it go away. But I think it's worth noting that the ethics questions, the use of state employees, the telephone calls that Linda referred to, this gives us something to hang our hats on, because
that keeps it responsible.
It keeps it responsible because it's not just sex.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
it doesn't appear that we're sort of descending into the gutter.
Right,
and so, and in fact, that is the part of the story that comes closest to fitting the conventional definition of news, because it does involve public money and public responsibilities. But you know, and the other stuff just sort of gets shoveled in on the side.
Jim, just one point I'd add: the president had been on a roll. I mean, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the same story, the same edition today of the Washington Post had a piece by Dan Balt saying that the president's 58% in the latest poll approval, highest he's been. Things are coming together. There's been a certain bonding with the Democrats on Capitol Hill. Talking to Democrats on the Hill this afternoon, there was sort of a tentativeness. Oh my gosh, how close should we get? Early anxiety pangs. But add to that, there's another problem. And it was a problem that Ronald Reagan had when he talked about family values, and in fact had a family where his own grandchild was never invited to the White House. I mean, you can imagine having your grandfather, President of the United States, and never getting to fly on the helicopter or go to Camp David or whatever, do those things. There's this problem that a lot of conservative hawks had on Vietnam, who were just so thoroughly anti-communist, and then had their documented records of avoiding military service personally. Bill Clinton had kind of hit his stride by rhetorically identifying this sense of a moral crisis in America, a sense of responsibility and accountability.
His speech in Memphis
really and subsequent speeches. And this becomes a problem if, in fact, people, if it's a Jay Leno monologue, if it's a David Letterman list of 10 things, then each time he raises that, are there going to be snickers in the audience?
What about the Bobby Ray Inman Social Security thing, Linda? There have been a lot of charges that there's a double standard as a result of that, because Zoe Baird had to go away, and so did some other folks who were nominated or at least suggested for jobs. How do you feel about that?
Well, I think there is a double standard, but in essence, I think there are some real important differences here. I think most of the American people were upset during the Zoe Baird nomination that she had hired an illegal alien. That was what upset them more than the fact that she did not pay Social Security taxes, and I think that that was a reaction to that. And this is an American woman whose Social Security taxes have not been paid by the nominee for the Secretary of Defense. I think the other problem was that Zoe Baird and Kimba Wood and all of the people whose names were floated around, these were all women. In essence, they were being picked, I think, because Bill Clinton wanted a woman in that role, and he didn't have any personal loyalty. So yes, there was a double standard, but this is a man he really wants badly for this job. He needs Bobby Ray Inman. He didn't need Zoe Baird.
What about the point, though, Mark, that Bobby Ray Inman certainly reads the newspapers. He knew about all this other stuff and didn't get around to even doing a thing about this until he was nominated.
If there's anybody in America who by last April wasn't aware of the fact that this was a problem and may have said, gee, hey, Sally Jean, how are we doing with Margaret? I mean, we've got her withholding taken care of, haven't we? Sally Jean might even said to Bobby Ray. I think there is a definite double standard here. Maybe, this is a fella, Bobby Ray Inman, who has to reach a comfort level with his commander-in-chief. Maybe he didn't reach one with the IRS, and that was...
Okay, well, we're going to leave it at that. Thank you all
for 4.5 months.
Well,
I mean, Bill Rempel and I are about as uncomfortable with those issues as anyone can be. We spent months going over them and trying to corroborate them, and it's not a pleasant task. It's not pleasant to ask people these questions. But we do think they're important because this story and the allegations go well beyond infidelity. They go beyond what came out during the campaign, and they go to the heart of what the president has done in recent weeks to try and silence these troopers, to discourage them to keep out. I think the most serious charges in our story hinge on the president's call to a trooper offering him a job as a regional director of the Federal Emergency Management Agency or a Little Rock U.S. Marshal's post, and offering a job through him to Roger Perry in order to discourage them to keep out. I think those are actions taken according to our troopers by a sitting president, and they raise serious questions about just what it is Bill Clinton's trying to hide and how far he's willing to go.
But Bill, going through Bill Clinton's phone records from 1989, seeing how many times he talked to a woman and for how long, honestly, did you have any qualms about doing that, and what do you think it really proves?
Well, understand that we went to those records to corroborate the stories of troopers. It wasn't to count how many phone calls were made. In fact, we didn't know we would find that when we looked in it. We were told by Trooper Larry Patterson, however, that he had been approached by aides to Governor Clinton during 1990 and told that because they were worried that the press might get on to some of his phone calls to a friend, that if they did, the aide wanted Larry Patterson to take the blame, to tell the press that he made those phone calls, that those were his girlfriend's phone calls, and that Bill Clinton, meanwhile, would pay the $40 that he'd run up in charges. We were looking to see if that would check out, and sure enough, not only did we find all these phone records that showed that he did make the phone calls, but we found the check that Bill Clinton wrote for $40.65 with his handwritten note on it for phone calls.
Sidney, we all talk about where was the press when Jack Kennedy was having all of his affairs. Isn't this fair game?
This strikes me as a large, deliberate distraction. I think that what we do know is that there's a small, far right-wing group of people who, through these disgruntled state troopers, have put out uncorroborated, salacious details, and through that have been able to pull the strings of the mainstream media and sending them, I think, like mindless gumshoes down blind alleys. To the extent that there has been some independent inquiry into this, what we have found, for the most part, are refutations of these charges. Now, I wish to add that not only is Cliff Jackson involved, who you mentioned in your earlier report, who has been engaged in a very long-time political and personal vendetta against the president, but a younger right-wing writer, I hesitate to call him a journalist, David Brock, who's written on Anita Hill and accused her of being a part of a conspiracy and a perjurer, charges that were very convincingly refuted in the New Yorker, my magazine, by two Wall Street Journal writers. Now, in his report, he produces charges made by these troopers about the First Lady's so-called sexual activities. They're quite lurid, quite explicit about her affairs. Now, either they're true or they're not true. Now, Brock has said in the Washington Post of tomorrow that it's purely circumstantial. In other words, more uncorroborated evidence. Well, either it's all true or not.
We're not here to defend David Brock's story by any means. We're here to talk about what
But Bill, let me ask
corroboration that we have.
Bill, let me ask you, because you admit quite candidly that you were contacted on this story by this Cliff Jackson, this notorious Clinton basher. Does that in any way sully your story?
Certainly not. Cliff Jackson was a source of our stories last year on the draft. But more than that, a source only goes so far. A source makes an introduction, and that's what Cliff did. He called me, in fact, before the American Spectator ever came to Little Rock. We were in Little Rock. We were down there before there was any right-wing conspiracy hatched. But Cliff Jackson made the introduction of us to the troopers, and at that point it ceased to be a Cliff Jackson enterprise. It was at that point a reporting enterprise, and at that point we had to win the confidence of the troopers, and then we had to corroborate what they had to tell us. And if it wasn't corroborable, there wasn't a story. That's what we did next. It was an old-fashioned piece of journalism, looking at records and talking to people, hours, days, weeks of interviews. And Cliff Jackson had nothing to do with that. That was 2 reporters from the Los Angeles Times.
Gentlemen, we have to break in here, but when we return, I want to ask you all about just how strong the evidence is on some of the major allegations, and also what some people are calling holes in this story. And we'll be back in a moment. Sidney Blumenthal. Doug, I think you would agree that the 2 most serious charges that you make in your story are, 1, that Clinton continued his affairs right through the election, and 2, that in the White House he was offering these troopers federal jobs in return for their silence. As I understand it, your evidence for that is just the testimony of the state troopers, correct?
Yes, by and large it is. It's the corroborated testimony, statements of, in one case, at least 2 state troopers. In another case, in the most serious case, is indeed, Chris, the phone call. And there we have only the word of the trooper who received it against the word of the White House. But that trooper, upon receiving those phone calls, contemporaneously described them to 2 other people. One of them was Roger Perry, who told us about those calls initially, and they were subsequently confirmed by the reporter by the trooper who received them. And also he told them to another trooper, and that trooper also confirmed for us the substance of those calls as described by the trooper who received them.
You know, we are talking here about the President of the United States. I guess I'd ask, why is that enough evidence?
Well, it's enough evidence to put out there because there's so much other evidence corroborating the underlying allegations that President Clinton, while the governor of Arkansas and after being elected president, was having affairs with women other than his wife. All 4 of the troopers we interviewed in depth over a period of several months confirmed independently that they took Clinton to late-night meetings with Jennifer Flowers and with other women. One of the women they described was the woman whose home received the telephone calls and who got the telephone calls at those offices. That was, for us, very important information, those telephone records, when we came across those, showing that there is a relationship that Bill Clinton had with this woman. And the White House, when we questioned them on Sunday night, absolutely refused to respond to any questions about that woman except to say this president calls a lot of people. Well, how many people does he call at 1:30 in the morning and talk for an hour and a half and then call back for 18 minutes a few hours later that morning?
Sidney Blumenthal, I can see you. Sidney, well, let me bring in Sidney Blumenthal at this point. I see you're not buying this.
This is highly suggestive, but no proof whatsoever. In fact, the Washington Post this morning reported that the Secret Service, which was around the President-elect Clinton, at the time that he was leaving Little Rock, when these troopers were claiming he was saying goodbye to a girlfriend, claimed that this was untrue. The Secret Service says it's untrue, according to the Washington Post.
I don't think they responded to this particular issue.
Yeah, well, yes, they were.
Well,
it was in the Post this morning. But there's a larger issue, and that is the question of perspective. What we see here is a kind of Geraldo effect, where the press is chasing factoids down these alleys, and you have political forces that set them in motion, that get what they want out of it, that create this kind of effect through the gradual slippage of standards. And the press thinks it's dealing with facts. But in fact, there are political motives and political forces that are behind this that ought to be considered. And it's very important that this perspective be brought to bear on these questions rather than thinking
Sidney,
in a narrow way.
Let me get to Bill on that issue. I mean, there's been a lot of suggestion that these troopers are somehow the tool of Cliff Jackson. There's been a suggestion they're in this to make money. Why do you think these troopers have come forward?
These troopers have come forward for no promise of money. They've been paid nothing. They've done this at great risk to their personal careers and to their comfort in their home state and their hometown.
Why?
I think they've done it as an exhibition of courage, not some kind of manipulation. They were troubled by what they did. It's a concern that has festered over the months and years, and I believe that they've come forward because they feel strongly about it, not because they're anybody's tool.
Sidney Blumenthal, whether it's true or not, and I know you have your doubts, that this is, you know, perception is reality. This story is all over the networks, all over the front pages. How does the White House plan to get past this?
I have no idea what their strategy is about this sort of business. I regard this as a rather trivial business. You know, the Clintons rather painfully and publicly discuss the difficulties in their marriage as their introduction to the American voters. And the voters elected Bill Clinton president. What this story says is simply that it suggests, without corroboration yet, that Bill Clinton had adulterous affairs, which is something he has admitted. There are other questions involved here, questions about the private lives of public figures and whether or not it has any bearing on their public performance. And there are the questions then about journalistic propriety and standards.
You know, let me respond to that, Chris, if I may.
You got about 15 seconds.
Okay, well, Sidney says that the president went on TV and addressed these questions. In fact, according to our troopers, he lied when he went on television and said that he did not have an affair with Gennifer Flowers. 4 of these troopers say that they delivered him frequently to late-night rendezvous there. They received her calls at the mansions for hundreds of calls over a period of 12 years.
Doug, we're going to have to leave it there. We're just flat out of time. Doug France, Bill Rempel, Sid Blumenthal, thank you all very much for joining us today.
Abuse of the powers of his office. We have more from our senior White House correspondent, Wolf Blitzer. Wolf?
Judy, the president is denying he ever offered federal jobs to his former Arkansas security officers to keep them quiet. Responding for the first time to allegations by Arkansas state troopers that they helped him engage in extramarital affairs, President Clinton said he did nothing wrong and insisted the charges are outrageous.
But I don't think that this is the sort of thing where any person should be in a position of defending himself, not a president. I have to work at being president. I have to do my job for the American people and let them draw their own conclusions.
Clearly hoping to put what he described as this painful matter behind him, he refused to go beyond a White House statement released earlier this week.
No. And I have nothing to add to what I said in my statement.
First Lady Hillary Rodham Clinton joined the president in an interview with Arkansas reporters and served them cookies. She denied the accusations were spoiling her holiday.
No, we're having a good time.
Ruin Christmas for you?
No. Christmas is too big in our family.
Back in Little Rock, the 2 state troopers who have been making the accusations continued their assault.
We told the truth about that. Bill Clinton knows we're telling the truth. And that's all we have to say about it.
On another sensitive matter, Mr. Clinton promised he would cooperate with federal investigators looking into a failed Arkansas savings and loan. Investigators want to see a file taken from the office of the White House Deputy Legal Counsel Vincent Foster, who committed suicide last July.
If anybody called here and asked to see it, I'd turn it over to the lawyers and we would cooperate with the law enforcement like we always, of course we would.
But White House Chief of Staff Mac McClarty, like Mrs. Clinton the day before, stopped short of promising that everything would be handed over.
As far as the specific issues, I think those will be taken one at a time. But I think the attitude of being cooperative, we are on record with and will proceed forward with. Yeah.
Republicans, now including Senate Minority Leader Bob Dole, are calling for a full-scale investigation.
Because we're talking about maybe favoritism by state regulators. You're talking about federal deposits, federally insured deposit might have been used for personal loans or to pay off political debts.
Now that the president has addressed the state troopers' allegations, his aides here at the White House are hoping the story will simply go away. That probably will be the case, but only if there are no more disclosures, and there's no guarantee of that. Judy?
Wolf, the president seemed almost subdued in answering these questions today. Was that a deliberate thing on his part? Because it seemed in contrast to Mrs. Clinton's more forceful defense yesterday.
I think that's a very good point, Judy. There's no doubt that President Clinton now sees himself, of course, as the president, very respectful of the office here at the White House, and he doesn't see himself in the same position as the First Lady or his aides in going after his accusers. He doesn't want to do anything, according to his aides here at the White House, that would belittle the office which he represents.
Wolf, does the White House at this point expect that more will come out of this, or do they think because it's the Christmas season it's all going to fade away?
Well, they're hoping it will all fade away, although they anticipate it won't fade away. They know there are still a lot of reporters down in Little Rock talking to all sorts of people, so they're hoping for the best, but they're anticipating the worst, in fact.
All right, Wolf Blitzer at the White House. Thanks. Bernie?
Thank you, Judy. Taking into account the presidential campaign, the Clinton team has had experience responding to potentially embarrassing situations. In this round of damage control, is it likely to be successful? Our political analyst, Bill Schneider, joins us with his thoughts on this. Bill, how does this affect Bill Clinton, the president, politically?
Well, Bernie, it's obviously not good. I mean, Washington is entering what the analyst Larry Sabato calls a feeding frenzy mode. Talk show hosts have a lot of material. But I don't think the public is particularly concerned yet for a couple of reasons. Obviously, it's Christmas, but there's a bigger reason. Bill Clinton is president of the United States. He's not just some candidate or a low-level office holder. And as a result, he represents America. So I think the standard of evidence is higher. A higher level of evidence, of proof, is required for a sitting president to do serious damage to a president. Most people, I think, are going to be disinclined to believe the worst about a president unless there is clear and convincing evidence of wrongdoing, that he broke the law, that he lied to the American people, that he tried to cover up, or that he offered bribes. All of those things have been alleged. None of them has been proved. A lot of the evidence is circumstantial or inconclusive. All the stories have really been uncorroborated, and the motives of the people involved are all highly suspect.
Well, given what you've said, is the president insulated from questions about his past personal behavior or private behavior?
Oh, absolutely not. But the question is what he did and when he did it. What's relevant here is not Bill Clinton's personal behavior in the past. It's whether he abused his power as governor, the sort of thing for which Republican Senator K. Billy Hutchison is now under indictment. It's whether he had illicit relationships after he appeared with Hillary Clinton on 60 Minutes, in which case, if he had illicit relationships after that, then he would have betrayed the trust of the American people, or whether he's tried to cover up illegal activities or offered bribes. Those stories are all relevant, but nothing has been proven. And I'm saying here that a higher standard of proof is required for a president than for a candidate, simply because the stakes politically are so high.
Well, lastly, historically, what is the importance of this story in the world of politics and the news media? This story affecting this president?
Well, Bernie, I'm afraid another barrier has really been broken in our politics and in our journalism. We're now treating a sitting president as if he were a candidate. Allegations, rumors, innuendo. Since Gary Hart, we've decided that everything about a candidate for the presidency, everything about his life, his temperament, his morals, his character, his medical, legal, financial records, all of that is relevant. But once a man has been elected president, once he's in office, however, higher standards are supposed to apply. But the same standards of coverage are being used as if you were a candidate. Sensational revelations about a candidate are presumably justified by saying it tells the American voters something they need to know about the candidate's fitness for office before he gets elected, and it's too late. But sensational revelations about a president that can't be proved or that haven't been proved, it's hard to say what function they serve. Politics, you know, has become a permanent campaign. The White House has said that it's conducting a permanent campaign, and that's exactly how they're being covered. Bernie?
Okay, Bill Schneider. By the way, where'd you get that tie?
It was a gift from friends.
Roll call. Good evening. President and Mrs. Clinton and the White House staff were dealing with legal, ethical, and personal questions on two fronts again today. Angry and frustrated that the charges erupted just as the president's political fortunes were taking a turn for the better. For his part, the president said it is not true, the allegations from Arkansas state troopers that they helped arrange extramarital affairs while he was governor. NBC National correspondent Bob Kerr.
Outside, a festive-looking White House ready for celebration. But inside, in a series of interviews, President Clinton called it a painful time, dominated by questions about his character.
And I'm working hard, very hard. And I don't think, you know, there's been no suggestion that anything about my presidency raises a character question.
In other interviews, he denied using his Arkansas State Police security guards to facilitate extramarital affairs. Mr. Clinton also denied offering state troopers jobs to guarantee their silence.
We did nothing wrong, and I don't want to speculate on the rest of it. I think, you know, what I have to do is to worry about being president.
But he refused to respond in detail and at times seemed uncomfortable.
So none of this ever happened?
I have nothing else to say. We did the stories are just as they have been said. They're outrageous, and they're not so.
State Trooper Larry Patterson insisted in Little Rock again today that he had, in his own words, procured women for Bill Clinton.
I am sitting here and I am telling the truth, and Bill Clinton knows I'm telling the truth.
The president wanted his year-end interviews to focus on what he called the high points of his administration so far. But even the president's chief of staff conceded today that it's hard not to be distracted by the controversy.
That we're trying to stay very focused on our business.
Once again, Mr. Clinton is dogged by questions stemming from alleged womanizing, and once again he seems unable to fully clear the air on the so-called character issue.
He's in a very difficult situation. He can't confirm what people think because there's an enormous downside to that. And he does have to dissemble about what is probably true.
Questions remain about the motive and stories told by Clinton's accusers, and the White House hopes this will go away, so the president won't have to start next year the way he's ending this one. Bob Kerr, NBC News, at the White House.
The other issue dogging the president tonight is an investment that he made in an Arkansas development that had a connection to a failed savings and loan. Now, leading congressional Republicans are asking for independent investigations. NBC's Pete Williams.
For the first time, the president and his chief of staff said if they're asked, they'll cooperate without saying how. A file on the Whitewater development in which the Clintons invested was taken from Vincent Foster's White House office immediately after his suicide. The White House said it was personal Clinton business and gave it to the president's private lawyer. The Justice Department is investigating the Arkansas development. Today, Mr. Clinton said if they want to see the file, he'll be cooperative.
I want to emphasize that. We've never been asked by the Justice Department in connection with any investigation they have by the people who looked into any other issue, including the Park Police, for that file. If anybody did, of course, we would cooperate with them.
But he stopped short of saying that the file would be turned over to them. His chief of staff was even more general.
As far as the specific issues, I think those will be taken one at a time. But I think the attitude of being cooperative we are on record with and will proceed forward with.
And the Senate Republican leader today became the latest to call for congressional hearings on the Whitewater issue.
It seems to me that there ought to be some independent review. Otherwise, I think the Democrats control the House, they control the Senate, they control the White House. The American people are going to start asking questions. Why can't we have the facts?
Senator Dole says if congressional Democrats won't call hearings, he'll ask the Clinton administration's Attorney General to appoint a special prosecutor. Pete Williams, NBC News, Washington.